This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Being in the business as long as I've been, and I used to watch, with Shula, was my first few years in the business, 92 to 95, right? And then Jimmy started 96. And then watching Jimmy, and then even into Dave Wanstead, there was a lot of hitting and a lot of tackling and two-a-days, and Jimmy would start off with inside drill. Everybody would do their individual stretch out, boom, and the first thing you did was inside drill. And you used to, when I was like a beat guy 25 years ago, you used to get a feel for a team, right? And I think nowadays, in general, the media is jumping to conclusions because in the NFL, at least, I don't think you really know what a team looks like because they don't play in the preseason until the third game. Right. And, that's the only time they perform. And then throughout the week, they're not really tackling. They're not really hitting a lot. And so I think the first 4 or 5 games of the regular season has now become kind of slash your preseason. That's when you get sharp with your tackling. That's when you get sharp with everything. And that's when you figure out who's who on some of those questionable positions. Not like Teron Armstead or Robert Hunt, but the left guard and the right tackle might change in that first month because you can really get a good feel. So I'm going to spin this to you now. From what you hear from coaches and what they tell you, do they hit enough? Do they tackle enough? Do they really find out enough to know about their teams? Because I almost feel like if you're not doing it at the NFL level, how the hell are you getting away with it in college when they've limited you there also?
Yeah, they really don't get a feel for it. Oh, I think you hit it on the head. I think a lot of this, people were kind of making fun of Manny Diaz back in the day when we would put out those videos of the guys tackling tires, those big inflatable tires that they would roll out in front of them. And the reality is that's the kind of tackling that goes on in these things. There's not a whole lot of hitting. There's a whole lot of thudding is what they call it. Because they want to avoid injury. And that's the reality now. These coaches know who their best players are. They don't need to see camp. The reality is they know, hey, when this guy's healthy and 100%, he's the best guy I've got. They have to know their rosters by now, right? Because a guy like Mario, he's already gone through a whole season. Obviously, he's got the transfers and some of the freshmen that have come in that he still needs to see go through their thing. But I think for the most part, he knows the strengths and the limitations of each of his players. And so what all they're trying to do when they go through practice a lot of the time is get through healthy without injury, because in the end, you got to have your best players available to you for when the games actually matter. So you're right. I don't think they get a good gauge. I think that's one thing I've heard many coaches say over the years, at least at the college level. We don't really know how good we are at tackling until the first or second game of the season. And
by the way, do college coaches also know that the way the game is being played now, they effed up the NFL. Absolutely. Seriously, I don't think people realize. I think most people don't realize this because they don't get to talk to people like I do. Scouts in the NFL now, they hate scouting linemen now.
Yeah.
Because nobody runs the goddamn ball. They don't put the hand on the ground. They don't know who's a road grader anymore unless the guy is so special that he stands out, that he's so good above everybody else. But pass pro, they all get a feel for it because that's all they do is pass pro all the time. And then the rules, they can fire off the line right away, right on the snap of the ball, which you can't do that in the NFL. And so there are a lot of things that have kind of changed the game of college football that have made it that much harder for the NFL. And that's why it's so much harder. That's why in the league, in the NFL, everybody pretty much has offensive line issues because, dude, it's really hard to figure out who the hell's a road grader.
Yeah, they don't really. We don't play the game the way that we used to. It's a 7-on-7, essentially, throwing the football every down, and those offensive tackles are basically playing defense against those pass rushers. They're just trying to stand in front of them as long as they can. So you don't get to see them move forward very often, and which is why, like you said, I think you see a lot of guys who get drafted. Sometimes they won't have necessarily great college careers, but the college coaches or the NFL scouts like their body type, like what little they've seen in film, and think I can develop this guy.
Footwork, strength,
right?
Say, okay, I can.
They look for ingredients.
Right. Right.
Exactly. And it's not so much, hey, was this guy All-America first team or second team or whatever, because to them, none of that really matters. It's more, hey, what do I see of the guy and what are his tools and what can I make of him? How injured is he? Is he coming to us unscathed with injury? Those kind of things matter to them more than anything else. So you're right. I agree with you 100% that, the evaluation of the offensive line, without question, is the hardest position.
Oh my God! Talk about a position set to be fired. Okay, you're going to only scout offensive linemen, huh? What? I don't get to scout any other position. It make it easy for me. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, dude, it has got to be impossible. And they tell me, the scouts tell me, like it is. We are just guessing at this point. It's going to be a run. We can guess who's going to be no. We have good information on who's going to be a pass blocker, but our information on run blocking, it is so few and far between. And it's got to be some guy at Georgia or some guy at Alabama or so. And even with that, sometimes it's really hard to even tell. Even with those kind of teams that do have a little bit more of a pro style where they, maybe run a little bit more and showcase it a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? But it's crazy, dude, how things have changed. All right, so progress. Talk to us a little bit. How's practice going? Where do the coaches feel the team is right now?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the same questions we came into camp with in terms of cornerback and receiver, trying to find guys emerging at those two spots. I think those are the two areas that competition sort of continues to fluctuate. I think you saw in this past scrimmage on Saturday, the two Brown brothers, Selwyn Brown's sons, started at cornerback for Miami. Damari, who is the big-time recruit locally here out of Plantation American Heritage, and his older brother, who played at UCF and started for 3 years. Those are the two guys that were starting at the outside corner position. You saw Jaden Davis playing a lot inside, the Oklahoma transfer. So I think, they're continuing to evaluate. Again, it's going to be the guys who perform the best. I don't think they care if it's a true freshman or a sixth-year guy or a guy who just got here. So I think that evaluation continues. I think receiver, I think who the first group is. You got Colby Young, you got Jacoby George, you got Xavier Restrepo. But I think, the true freshman, Ray is coming along and making an impact. There's some guys who might be past at that position. But for the most part, the rest of it is pretty much what we expected to see on paper. The offensive line hasn't changed. It's the same five. The running backs, A.J. Allen, who we thought would come in here, the transfer from Nebraska, would come in here and make a little bit of an impact. He had a nice game in the scrimmage. I still think he's not the number one running back. I still think it's going to be Henry Parrish, who was a starter last year, at least in the beginning of the season. But we'll see what happens sort of going forward. And the last thing is just James Williams in safety. He didn't start and get a whole lot of reps with the first team. He was playing some at the linebacker position, but I chalk that more up to experimentation. And seeing Markeith Williams, what he can do.
That Williams kid reminds me of what's his name? Keith Traylor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where I'm going?
No. Well, go ahead. Keep going.
Keith Traylor came into the league as a fucking safety.
Right.
But he was
up on the defensive line.
He was so big as a safety.
Yeah.
That then made him a linebacker. But he was so big as a linebacker that they made him a defensive end. And then he was so big as a defensive end, they said, play defensive tackle. And when I look at that James Williams kid, it's almost like, bro, you're too big to play back there. and it's almost like they start playing you closer and closer to the line because his body is probably still developing. And so I'm not surprised that you're playing him at linebacker, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at defensive end because, young man, the closer you get to the line, the more money you're going to make.
Yeah. I agree with you, Owen. What's funny is that coming out of high school, everyone was saying this. Everybody who watched him play high school ball down here was saying that, this is a guy that has Javon Curse type ability at the line of scrimmage. He could be that kind of a wrecking ball up front. And but it's one of those things too where the kid grows up. Everybody's afraid to tell him no because they don't want him to leave their high school. Nobody wants him to lose. Certainly Manny Diaz in Miami didn't want him leaving South Florida for Georgia or somewhere else. So what do you say? All right, we're going to play at safety. And I think ultimately somebody needed to have a hard conversation with that guy earlier in life and just say, hey, You want the big payday, get closer to the line of scrimmage. So
Yeah, you're not Anthony Chicoloing the guy, okay?
right,
And for those of you that don't know, obviously we had a boneheaded coach here that got Anthony Chicolo and basically effed up his career playing him at a position that he shouldn't have played in. You know what I mean? And so,
yeah,
those kind of moments end up becoming stories that last forever. And then those are the things that scare people at times. But, sometimes your body's evolving. And that Williams kid just, I'm not saying he's going to end up like Heath Traylor as a defensive tackle. I'm just saying I'm not surprised that his body is evolving, that he's going to start getting closer and closer to the line of scrimmage because, brother, I mean, at one point you're going to be too big to be back there.
yep,
That's
yeah.
the way it is. Those guys are going to be too fast for you. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
On the recruiting side, any kind of news there?
Well, they picked up a couple commitments over the weekend. Kavian Broussard, another big offensive tackle, 6'6", 276, a 3-star kid out of Louisiana. Again, they keep going into the state of Louisiana to get guys, and what else do you expect, right? Your 2 coordinators are from there. They have roots there, and so obviously they're going to have some pipelines to build, and I think that's a good thing. Miami needs to get kids from the southeast, the entire southeast, not just the state of Florida. I think we've made that mistake in the past. Miami has, of relying too much of in-state talent, and it just, for whatever reason, it's not a good mix. And then they flipped Elias Rudolph, who is a 4-star edge rusher kid that's really out of the Ohio area, the Cincinnati, Ohio area. He came down here briefly, transferred to Deerfield Beach, I think in the summertime when his coach was supposed to coach down here in the springtime. Ends up going back to Cincinnati where he'll play his senior year. But a kid that was committed to Michigan, another one of these big, tall, long edge rushers that's fast, can get to the quarterback, a disruptor up front, and so you need lots of those guys. To me, you take 6 or 7 of those guys, and you hope 2 or 3 of them pan out, and you just have them in the rotation, and that's how you get really, really good.
All right. I saw you had to write a story on Alex Collins, man.
Yeah,
wow, what a shame. 28 years old, motorcycle accident. Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrible tragedy. I just gotten back home last night and was working, and somebody messaged me and said, "Hey, did you hear about Alex Collins?" And I said, I hadn't heard the news. I was driving back from St. Augustine late Sunday night, got here late Sunday night, and I saw the police report from Broward Sheriff's Office around 9:15, and it said that he was the one who had died in a motorcycle crash. So terribly sad story. All I remember about the kid from the years that I covered him, I wrote a story about him before his senior year, was just how well-rounded he was. He wanted to learn sign language. He wanted to, he played the piano. This is a guy who was unbelievable in track, the best football player in Broward County at the time. And yet he was very well-rounded, very eager, and then of course the infamous story where his mom runs off with his national letter of intent because she wanted to sign with Arkansas. She wanted him to stay home, and the next day, of course, he signed and ended up at Arkansas and having a really, I thought, a good college career. Didn't necessarily equate to the NFL. He had some positive moments, but either way, terribly sad. Too young. 28 years old is too young. And I feel like every year I'm writing a story about these kids. Every year I'm writing about somebody we've lost.
That's right. Every day, I say it all the time. Every day is a blessing that we open our eyes, bro. Because look, I was reading the story, and the kid was born in '94. Brother, I was 28 in '94.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now I'm 56. I'm going to be 57 soon. It's like, every day is precious, man, because you don't know when is our last day and when we're going to check out, unfortunately. And to see that we lose that young man at 28 and apparently loved by all, bro.
Yeah, just a guy who
everybody that was tweeting about him had stories, and I thought RG3 had a nice one.
Yep.
Just impressive stuff. He left a lasting impression with a lot of people, and we're not a better place without him, unfortunately.
No. Buddha was his nickname. That's what everybody called him down here who knew him. And
lost a good human being, man. Which that is, and too young, 28 years old. My Lord, you have so much life left, man. It's a real shame. What do you got going on at the Athletics so folks can check you out, my friend?
Well, listen, it's preseason preview time, so there'll be a ton of those coming out. I'm working on the ACC preview right now with Grace Rayner, who had covered Clemson and does recruiting with me. We both cover the ACC extensively, so there'll be an ACC preview. I have my oddly specific predictions for the top 25 in college football. I went through every single college team, came up with what's going to happen to them during the season and a few interesting stats. That'll be coming out tomorrow, as well as with the podcast. Just busy, man. Just busy time of year, and I spent last Friday the entire day at IMG Academy interviewing a bunch of these elite kids that come from around the country to come play there. So there'll be more stories coming off of that. So there'll be plenty to read in the Athletic, college football wise, for sure.
I'm sure of that. Follow him on Twitter at Manny_Navarro and subscribe to The Athletic. Manny, as always, thank you, my brother. We'll catch up on Friday.
Good talking to you. Take care.
Thank you, sir. There you go. And don't forget Canes wear. Man, they got anything and everything practically with the Canes logo on it. Plus, they got all kinds of Inter-Miami gear, messy shirts. Come on, man. We got a messy game tonight against the Philadelphia Union. You got to go buy a hat. Go get something, sports something new. Going to the bar tonight to watch the Inter game. Going to watch it at home. Cheer it on, man. Wear a T-shirt, something like that. At Caneswear, they've got all kinds of Inter-Miami gear. They've got Miami Heat gear, Miami Dolphins gear. They've got Marlins gear. The Marlins trying to make the playoffs here. Let's see. Try to get yourself a Marlins hat. I've bought myself a couple Marlins hats there at Caneswear. You can do the same thing, baby. Caneswear.com. If you can't visit, you can go online, and if you order over $99, you will get free shipping. Caneswear.com.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.